Thanks very much indeed, Claire, and thanks for all the work that you do in CSP. And for those who don't know Claire, when I play my little game about when I look around at senior trade unionists, who would I want to be my shop steward? Claire, I have to say, is top of the list. On behalf of the TUC, thanks for everyone for coming to this seminar today, and I think it is a very timely seminar discussing yet another failed dimension of the free market project, namely the outsourcing of public services. Now, it's been said that we're now in the third phase of modern capitalism. The first, that ran till the 1970s, saw capital seeking to profit from industry. The second, which ran until the crash of 2008, saw capital seeking to profit from finance. And the third, which we're very much in the midst of now, these are overlapping phases, I take it, is capital seeking to profit from our public services. Now, since the 1980s, governments across the world have accelerated the process of public sector privatisation, competition and outsourcing, helped on their way by a growing army of specialist consultancy companies, aided and abetted by wider corporate interests and, of course, private equity. That process has now reached a crunch point, nowhere more so than here in Britain. First pioneered under Thatcher and Major, and then continued under Blair and Brown, privatisation is now being taken to a whole new level under Cameron and Clegg, under the auspices of the Open Public Services White Paper. But as the government looks to offer up each and every part of our public realm to private sector competition, I think the tide is turning decisively against the cannibalistic cult of outsourcing. So in this session, as Claire said, we want to look at how we can help build a progressive alternative, a distinct political programme that says, yes, we can improve our public services within the context of public ownership and democratic accountability. And I'm in no doubt that this is an argument that we can win. As you've heard earlier this morning, there is a mounting body of evidence to suggest that the much trumpeted cost savings attributed to outsourcing often turn out to be a load of baloney. As unions know from experience, so-called efficiency gains have been achieved not through service innovation and improvement, but because jobs, staff terms and conditions and union protection have been cut to the bone. What's more, I think as we get wise to the mysterious arts of multinational corporate accounting, it's becoming clearer and clearer that the size of profit margins can be disguised and tax obligations avoided. There's also a mounting body of evidence of outsourcing failures, with high-profile disasters increasingly common. G4S failing to provide security for the Olympics, A4E helping just 4 in 100 unemployed people back to work, ATOS passing people who suffer from cancer as fit for work, not to mention the £40 million fiasco over franchising for the West Coast Main Line. Finally, there's a mounting body of evidence to suggest that those local authorities, such as Suffolk and Cornwall, that have pursued outsourcing most aggressively, are in fact paying the price. Interestingly, so-called One Barnet, whose approach has been likened to that of Ryanair because nothing's included and everything costs extra, appears to be in deep trouble too. Even Brian Coleman has voiced concerns. And let's face it, Brian has a lot to be worrying about at the moment. This is the man who, of course, was responsible for privatised parking in Barnet. He's currently up on a charge of assault by beating and careless driving following an incident where a woman tried to photograph him parking illegally. Now, it would be quite wrong of us to prejudge the outcome of the trial. All we can do is watch, wait and hope that the full force of justice falls squarely on Brian Coleman's odious head. Given the evidence and much greater media scrutiny of these issues, it's hardly surprising that the public are increasingly sceptical about outsourcing. A joint TUC Fabian Society report suggested that around 2/3 of voters are against the idea of opening up services to private provision. And it's up to us to build on that groundswell of public support to our advantage. And I do want to pay tribute to all those grassroots campaigns, from Barnet Together to Stroud Against the Cuts, opposing the outsourcing of NHS services in Gloucestershire, which have brought together trade unionists, service users and communities to oppose privatisation. But we've also got to show that there is a plausible alternative to the madness of mass outsourcing, and that, exactly as others have said, that we are the true champions, not just of public service workers, but of all those who rely on them. It's not just about making the political and the moral case for change, but we also have to show that there is a strong value for money case too. And the good news is that around the country there are great examples of trade unions forming alliances with local authority leaders to show that there are better, more effective ways to improve services when times are tough and money is tight. To take just one, the Wales TUC and Welsh Labour Government have signed a public sector agreement about managing public service change, promoting a collaborative approach, including retention of public services in the public sector. And our challenge is to make that model become the norm rather than the exception. And while of course it's our responsibility to build relationships with politicians of all stripes who share our reservations about outsourcing, including Lib Dems, the Welsh and Scottish Nats, our biggest political job is to convince senior figures within Labour of the strength of our values and the need for new thinking. Together we need to show that in sectors where there's been clear private sector failure, for example the Southern Cross scandal in care homes, we need alternative approaches such as local authority social care commissioning. In that case, the good news is that Andy Burnham seems to be on the case, waking up to widespread public misgivings about private sector involvement in such services. But more generally, we've got to show that if Labour is serious about, for example, promoting the living wage, then it needs to acknowledge the part that privatisation has played in driving down pay and driving unions out. Delivering a living wage is much easier if staff are employed directly, if they're unionised, and if services stay in-house. As well as building the political case for an alternative to outsourcing, we also need to do our bit to build the evidence case for change, and it's vital that we work together, pool our resources, share research, develop the empirical arguments against privatisation and for public provision of services. And again, I want to applaud everybody involved in the new Public Services Research Network, bringing together academics, think tanks, unions, and everyone with an interest in non-market reform of our public services to do just that. So, as I said at the beginning, I think the tide is turning in our favour. The arguments are on our side, the public are on our side. And in time, if we keep up the pressure for a progressive alternative, the force of political opinion will be on our side too. And perhaps then we'll see a fourth phase, one where governments put the interests of citizens before corporations and people before profit. Thank you.